Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while, but today I'm back with the coloring process for my banner for my new website portfolio. And I've decided to work in Clip Studio today. To be honest, I've been working in Clip Studio a lot because I just really love this program, and I've kind of recently come over the other edge of a huge learning curve for it, learning, how to feel comfortable with all the tools. I started this piece, coloring it rather, by flatting all of my values. As you can see, that's what all those grays were. There's an amazing flatting tool that you can get for free in Clip Studio Assets that just fills the space, and you don't have to have perfect line art either, because I don't have particularly clean line art, but it just fills in those gaps and I love it. And in fact, all of the tools that I use today are either default tools that come with Clip Studio just out the gate, or I picked them up for free in the Clip Studio Assets. There are some amazing assets that other artists are giving away for free, or you can pay for them, but I super duper recommend you check out the Clip Studio Assets if you have Clip Studio. This isn't even sponsored or anything. I just am really passionate about this because I think it's such an accessible program. You can get it really affordably. It even goes on sale quite a bit throughout the year, so always look out for that. And it's a super powerful, lovely program that you can use for both PC or Mac. And like I said, this isn't sponsored. I'm just passionate about it. And I've been working with it a lot more for illustrative work recently. I kind of have moved over to doing more of my design elements or finalization in Photoshop, but really illustrating in Clip Studio almost exclusively now, just because of the tools that it provides and the, range of assets available. It makes illustrating faster. It makes making comics faster. I really love it. For a long time, I was struggling with finding the right inking brush for Clip Studio because I don't know. I was working on a laptop for a really long time and using the Wacom Intuos, and I've used a non-screen tablet for years, but something about the combination of that MacBook and also that tablet made it really hard for me to find a pressure setting that I really liked. But when I built my PC and I switched over to the XP Pen screen tablet and started working with the in both the screen tablets pen pressure settings and Clip Studio's pen pressure settings, I really found something that I truly liked. And then I actually decided to ink with pencil brushes. I love the pencil brushes in Clip Studio, and I also have picked up some pencil brushes from the assets from other artists, and I truly love them and highly recommend checking that out if you feel like you want something a little bit rougher but still feel smooth to use. I recommend trying pencil brushes for inking. There are no rules as far as what brushes you use for inking, and we put a lot of rules on ourselves, but we don't have to. I actually also scooted the pencil brushes into my brush pen menu so that when I hit B on my, I have a ducky pad separate from my keyboard that my partner built me. I can maybe try to insert a picture here. But when I hit B on that, it opens that tool up. Because the thing about Clip Studio is that all the tools are separated. As far as like the difference between your pen tool, your brush tool, your pencil tools are all separate tools. And I get the idea of it, but it just truly is a lot more trouble when I'm searching for a hotkey. So it's easier for me to just jam them all into one window, which you can do. So I started this piece, you probably noticed, with the gray value flats, because when I'm doing any kind of dramatic lighting, knowing what my values are is super important. Even beyond just the values within each element, I need to know what the overall values are in the foreground, midground, and background. And while this is a very shallow depth image, I would say I probably only have more of a foreground and a background. There are still elements here that I wanted to push forward. So in this case, it's the figure. I wanted the figure to have the most attention, and then the bed pillows kind of gets the secondary attention. And the background is really, really dark. All the lights are off in the room except for these kind of LEDs and the neon sign in the background and the computer. So those are going to be my main light source. Maybe there's a lower light source coming from in front of them. Like the door is open and the hall light is coming in, and you're opening the door and you're seeing this. And that's what's providing the illumination of the figure. But otherwise, there's a lot of backlight, rim light. And so I wanted to make sure that my values were dark going into it, rather than using a multiply layer with a shadow like I usually do for dramatic lighting. I prefer to do that when there's just like one big light source and I'm removing shadow from a very particular area. But if the whole image is overall dark, I want to start with my dark values. And by doing that in black and white, it really gives me a good foundation to build off of in color, because color is harder to read value in than black and white. You can do it by putting maybe a black and white filter over your color layers, or one thing I like to do is zoom way out and then squint. I highly recommend that, or walk back from my computer to make sure that everything's reading. But I like to put it down to what I would call like a thumbnail size, maybe some like the preview on your computer, for instance. And read it and make sure it's reading in the way that I want, and then blow it back up and start working on all of the lighting some more. And in Clip Studio, I tend to use the softer brushes less and use pencil brushes more, even for my highlights and shadows. And I like that. I think it pushes me to add more texture. I don't know if I talked about this in my last video, but I've really been wanting more texture in my art. I feel like I don't like the soft blending and gradient tool use that I was relying on a lot in my art. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great style for anybody, but it wasn't me. It wasn't my personal favorite way to color. And I think I wanted to experiment a little bit more and use more textured brushes. And by using the pencil tools on low opacity, I can still get texture, but get that sheerness that I liked, or that blendability that I really liked from my airbrushy kind of brushes. And I rarely ever use the blending tool, even in Clip Studio. I never use it in Photoshop, and I almost never use it in Clip Studio. It smears the color around. I don't particularly like that method because I feel like I lack control in it. I'm kind of a little anal retentive and tend to prefer the Alt Color Select blending method. Sometimes on backgrounds I'll use the blending tool, but for my figures I almost exclusively just kind of Alt Select. And this provides me with a little bit more grit and more texture as well, as the accuracy I want, or I suppose like control I want over where color is going. And just because I, have set values for each section, that doesn't mean those sections don't have value variation within them. So here you can see me working on light and shadows. There were some places that needed way more shadow because, even the rim lights or the background lights weren't going to touch them at all. And I also wanted to add, texture and what would you call that, weight to each individual piece, because each fabric here, the bedding fabric is a different weight than the pillow fabric, and a different weight than the shirt fabric, and different weight than the hair. And to really demonstrate that, I wanted to go in and get these values varied, as well as a lot of color variance, because objects aren't one color usually, because of the way light reflects off of them, or even, fabrics tend to have multiple colors within the weave, so I try to capture a little bit of that. Skin is especially one of those things where I tend to go a little ham. I love the color variation in skin. I think it's very neat. And, with darker skin tones, you get to play more with how light bounces off of skin. With lighter skin tones, you get to play more with, like, seeing the translucency of the skin and the vessels closer to the surface and everything. Those things are more obvious on lighter skin. So depending on what value of skin tone you're working with, there's a lot of fun variation as well. And it's really nice to get to deal with that a little bit in art. I really love working with humans, if you haven't noticed. Some of my favorite subjects. In the background, I'm working on the girls neon sign. I assume in this context it would probably be kind of a fake neon sign. You'll see them a lot on like Etsy and stuff, but they're like DIY, not DIY, what is it, made to order kind of fake neon signs. But I really want like a neon sign or fake neon sign in my room. I think it'd be dope. The interesting thing about neon signs is that the color that comes off of them, the radiating light, tends to seem darker than the inside light, which I found a really neat brush, again for free in Clip Studio Assets, that is a brush specifically designed to look like neon lights. Even then, you can see me playing around with some of the overlay and screen layers, and you get down to like 10% overlay layer. Like, what is that really doing? But it's doing something, okay? It's doing something. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it, even if it's just for my mental assurance. It's doing something. And you can see me fiddling with it, and also adding some of the background connections, wires, frame that the sign is on, and then going into the hair and really getting some of that light reflecting off the hair, especially the dark parts, because the dark hair, again, has more pigment. It is going to reflect light. Sorry, my screen actually my screen actually went out, so I had to like shake my mouse and turn it back on. Apparently I've been narrating for a while here. I love jewelry, so I kind of went a little bit ham on the accessories here. I just kind of wanted something that represented what I love to draw, which is figures, sassy faces, and crazy lighting. I love crazy lighting. My partner and my friends often comment on the fact that I love to do dramatic lighting situations, and I didn't notice at first. Like, there's a lot of things that say don't worry about your style, it'll develop on its own based on your interests and what you choose to focus on. And they're correct. Because a lot of things that I don't notice about my art until later, I'll be like, oh yeah, I think I kind of like doing this, and people are like, yeah, I know, it's in all your art. Unless it's like commissioned stuff or, client work where they need me to do something very specific, I'll do that. But if I'm defaulting, I'll probably work on dramatic lighting. And when I chose to work on my comic, I put it in space. And like part of that was just like the nature of mecha comics, although you can be on land. Look at is it G Gundam? Plenty of other like Zoids. You can be on a planet or whatever. But for me, I wanted to work in space. And part of that was because I hate drawing backgrounds, let's be honest. And another part of that was I love dramatic lighting, and I thought on the ship, I could really play with that super dramatic lighting. One of my biggest inspirations is kind of like in Star Wars on the the Empire Dark Side ships. You have a lot of that dramatic red lighting to establish, these people are bad guys. But overall, it creates a very interesting, dramatic lighting that is very color oriented, and I really like that, that shadowy silhouette with the dramatic rim lighting. Mwah, chef's kiss. And there's, a lot of other series that do that. I think especially sci-fi loves that kind of lighting because it's mysterious, it's futury. There's a lot of, cyberpunk that uses that kind of lighting. And, I feel like a lot of cyberpunk stuff is mostly aesthetic now rather than thematic, but that's a whole other video that I don't know that I'm qualified to make. But I do love that dramatic LED kind of neon lighting late night. I don't know if it's also because I have the insomnia or what, but I'm often up really late at night, even when I try to go to bed early. Not that I don't enjoy daytime and sunlight, I do. Although I think I'm far more of a rainy, stormy weather person by default. And there's also, super fun stuff to render in stormy weather and grayed out details. I either like working in high saturation or low saturation where everything's kind of grayed out. Totally different moods. Fun to render both, although I think this kind of funky dramatic lighting with high saturation colors is delicious and probably my favorite. I will say I kind of wish that I worked at a higher DPI here. I wasn't paying attention, my bad. But Clip Studio's default DPI for some reason seems to be 70. I usually work at 300 as a base. And while it's not as important with digital work, it's really important if you plan to print anything. So here it's not as big of a deal because obviously I said this was a banner for a website, but it is a big deal, like I said, if you want to print anything. And for my shop and stuff, I often am printing prints or stickers, so it's important to work at a higher DPI if you're going to do anything like that. So, you know, just beware and double check. Don't be a fool like me. In a moment here, you're going to see me struggle with the font / text tool. Usually I pull illustrations into Photoshop to do any sort of text work, but because this is actually part of the packaging of the candy they're holding, it's Pocky, but it's knockoff Pocky that I've called Choco. It's not cigarettes. I do not smoke, and I do not condone smoking on my website. But because it's part of the packaging, I wanted to kind of use the tool in Clip Studio. However, I haven't really gotten over the text tool learning curve the same way I have a lot of the other tools. So I definitely struggled with this. I also don't know how I feel about the perspective warp tool in Clip Studio yet. Still figuring that out, still getting over that learning curve, because it wasn't really warping in the way that I wanted to, and it didn't really seem super user-friendly in the same way. Maybe I need a different tool. Maybe it's called something else. That's a really important thing with using different programs, is kind of checking out what each tool is called in each program and making sure to fill with the hotkeys, because like when I hit L in this program, it doesn't take me to lasso like it would in Photoshop. It actually takes the default hotkey, takes you to the light table, I think is what it's called. So you can mess around with hotkeys. You probably will need to if you're used to using any other program. But yeah, there's definitely a learning curve with switching. However, I much prefer illustrating in Clip Studio now than I do in Photoshop. And I want to try doing a lot more in Clip Studio. Clip Studio is not a replacement for Illustrator, but that's okay because I don't have the whole Creative Suite anymore anyway, so I just do my best with Photoshop now and Clip Studio. But yeah, this is the finished piece coming up, and I really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. Like and subscribe, and have a great day. Bye!